Bethany Murphy. Bethany is a seasoned event management professional with over 20 years experience in technology sector. I'm just going to give you a little bit, but right now I want you guys to start clapping your hands right now. Start clapping your hands right now. Start clapping your hands right now. And give it up for the one and only Bethany Murphy.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Really, really excited to be here today. Going to be talking about how to build a standout user conference. So, really excited about this. I think user conferences have such a unique and amazing opportunity to have business impact. So we're going to talk all about how to create an amazing user conference. So certainly hoped that people have questions and that I can answer those toward the end of the session as well. So if you have questions please put those in the Q&A. So there's so much to talk about regarding user conferences. I'm really going to focus on 4 key components today. Super happy to chat with anyone offline with other questions, but really going to focus on strategic planning. So how to balance that creativity, all the kind of logistics and cross-functional collaboration that it takes to put on a user conference, how to create memorable experiences. I think this is something I feel super passionate about. Now more than ever, it takes a lot for people to leave their houses to go to an event. So it can't just be about the content, although of course that's super important, but how do you create those wow moments during an event? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Budgeting with precision. So anyone that knows me knows I love a budget. I could talk budgets all day, which I know is weird for an event person, but I'm going to really give some key tips and tricks on how to strategically manage a budget throughout the process of planning. And then ROI. I think us as event marketers, it's really on us to prove the value of any event that we're doing to the business as a whole. So, how do you make sure that you're measuring success and that you're hopefully exceeding your goals at the end of the day? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So starting with strategic planning, determine goals, right? I think this is the first step in planning any event. Someone comes to you internally and says, like, I want to put on an event. Well, why, right? What are you trying to achieve as an organization through these events? Because that will help you in setting everyone up for success at the end of the day, right? The why behind the event. And you really need that in order to be successful. Second, stakeholder management and buy-in, right? I think, again, before you even start going down the road of planning a user conference, it is super, super important to have that executive buy-in from the onset. We all know that events are really expensive, even more so now every day, super expensive. So you need that buy-in. You need to have alignment cross-functionally, set expectations, I think is super important, right? The market, the realities of the market are really challenging. Events are a huge line item. Costs have increased, right? I say all the time, like, is your grocery bill the same as it was a couple of years ago? Because mine certainly is not, right? And those costs trickle down into transportation and AV to everything, right? And so setting those clear expectations and managing those from the onset is really, really critical. Venue selection, right? I mean, this seems like table stakes and, you obviously need a venue to execute an event, but really thinking about how that venue can help you enhance that event experience, right? Maybe it's not a standard hotel ballroom that is going to make you, allow you to do that, right? Maybe it's a cool, funky venue that that will help you again, kind of align to your brand and allow you to showcase that through the venue. So we know that it's a seller's market right now. It's super hard. Availability is really tight. So again, this user conferences require a lot of advanced planning, right? Again, I would say, like, depending on the size of the event, 1 year at the minimum. Right. And that is, that is super important, again, to make sure that you have that time so that you're set up for success throughout the process. And that you're able to find a venue that works for your event in that, in the given planning process. Content strategy. Again, I think content is king, right? People go to events for the content. So make sure you're prioritizing that high value content, right? Make sure you're polling attendees, asking them what they want to hear about in the event. We here at 6sense, a lot of our user conference content is customer driven. Customers want to hear from customers, right? Want to hear how customers are using your product to be successful in their role. So, making sure you have that type of content, making sure that you're aligning with your business objectives, right? Do you have a product launch that's coming up? Can you tell your attendees about what's on the product roadmap? I mean, customers want to hear that, and as do prospects, right? So spending that time and making sure that you have those people internally that can help you develop that content. And I think, again, making sure that the way you're finding fun and creative ways to deliver that content. I think it's, again, not enough just to have presenters talking heads for hours. Come up with those, fun interactive workshops or hands-on sessions, right? Demos, find ways for people to really engage. And I think that goes a long way to creating that great content. And then attendee experience. I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but again, it's not enough now to just have the content be great. There's a lot of ways to consume content, virtual events and white papers, and make sure you are delivering that differentiated experience, because that goes a long way to creating that brand affinity and helping you achieve your goals. All right, moving on. This is, well, I don't know, budgeting might be my favorite, but this is probably my second favorite section of the presentation. But creating those memorable experiences. I think attendee engagement should be intentional, it should be immersive, and it should be aligned with the purpose of the event. And experiences should enhance and not overshadow the education and the networking opportunities. So how are you creating those wow moments for attendees, again, to build that brand affinity? So here's kind of a couple things that we think about. Balancing content and experience. Again, how do you create those activations, those experiences that really complement the learning environment and not distract from it, right? So again, is it workshops? Is it, demos in your exhibit hall? Is it these like amazing speakers, right? Figure out the content and then weave in the experience. Like we had a drum line that started off our event last year in Vegas, and it just got everyone super pumped up and kind of ready for the day, right? So creating those wow moments that really do complement your content. High impact activations. I mean, I think this is kind of table stakes now. You need to be creating these unique experiences to boost engagement and ROI from your event. So you can see here on the right, we were in Vegas for our user conference last October, and we created this custom pickleball court on our trade show floor. It was not an inexpensive activation, but it was super cool and really drove a ton of engagement. We had Elvis, you can see Elvis in the back. He was our ref. But how do you create those kind of memorable experiences? And I think a lot of times, like, you don't need to spend a lot of money in order to do that, right? Like there's other fun, creative ways that you can do that without spending a ton of money. And I think some of that goes to personalization, right? Personalization is super key now in everything that we're doing. Whether that's creating a personalized agenda through the app or using an AI tool, and through on-site experiences. And again, some can be inexpensive ways. Like every single account that comes to our conference, we make sure we're setting up a meeting with them pre-event to meet on site, right? And that creates those personal touches, builds those relationships. It doesn't cost any money. It takes time and it takes a lot of planning, but it doesn't cost any money. And we just did, at our user conference, we had laser engraving for water bottles, right? So it was just a fun way for people to personalize an item, bring it home for their kids maybe. And it wasn't super expensive at the end of the day, but it was fun and it created memories for people. And then make sure you are making data-driven decisions, I think, with these experiences. Again, some can be super cost effective and some can be on the more expensive side. So make sure you are looking at the value of everything you're doing, and that, again, it makes sense for your brand, aligns with your brand, and helps you drive impact at the end of the day. All right, budgets. Again, I'll try not to talk too long about this, but I think budget management is both an art and a science, right? Effective budget management ensures financial responsibility while delivering exceptional results, and ideally, at the end of the day, maximizing the impact that your event can have, which is what we all want at the end of the day. So I think strategic revenue planning is kind of the number one, right? So really thinking about building out a revenue plan, looking at all of your costs, right? Coming up with the kind of bigger ticket items, food and beverage, AV, agency support, whatever those experiences, whatever your kind of big buckets are, kind of start there, right? Think about those big pieces, build out what you think you need to execute an event. I would say add like 10 to 15%, right? If you're looking at an event that's a couple years out, certainly add a couple percentages a year, just for cost increases across the board. And then really think about, from a revenue perspective, what you can realistically drive to offset your event costs. So we have sponsors for our user conference and for a lot of our events. And, we have historical data, right? So I'm using historical data to say, okay, last year we drove X in sponsorship. This year, I feel like, we've gotten a lot of outreach already. We could potentially drive an increase of 10 to 15% in sponsor revenue. Look at your ticket prices, right? Look at ticket prices, look at how many attendees you're expecting. And again, I would say everything is increasing in cost year over year. So I think it is totally reasonable to have your ticket prices increase. Again, I wouldn't say a 25% increase, right? But I think it's realistic if you're trying to deliver the same event for the same amount of money and the same experiences year over year, you're not going to be able to do it, right? So you have to make up those costs somewhere. So think really strategically about, again, the revenue plan as a whole, and kind of start there. And then number two, real-time budget tracking. I think this is something I talk a lot about. Budgets are not a set it and forget it, right? I think it is essential to be in your budget every single day. Budgets are a working document. I mean, I'm probably a psycho, but I'm literally in all my budgets every single day, constantly inputting actuals, inputting estimates, moving buckets around. You will not be successful in managing an event budget if you just set it and then you go back post-event to reconcile. You will not be successful. Again, given costs of everything are just through the roof, really be tracking real time, and it will set you up for success, and it will make you look amazing to your finance team and all your internal budget stakeholders as well. This is also super important. Have a buffer, have a contingency, right? I think there's always unexpected expenses that come up. You have an attrition situation come up because you can't fill your room block, your food and beverage costs come in higher, right? You have consumption is higher on your snacks and your beverages. An executive comes to you super last minute and says, we have to do this really cool thing, right? You have to have a contingency. And again, I would say I like to have 10%. I think 10%, 5 to 10%, always in your back pocket. Again, your sponsor revenue may come in lower, your ticket revenue, right? You just don't know what's going to happen. And I think it will set you up to be successful if you make sure that you have money in your pocket, I think, and be transparent with finance about it, right? Because they may be looking at your budget saying, well, it's looking like you're going to come in under and we're going to take that money away from you, right? No, we can't. That is absolutely essential that I have that there. That is going to set us all up for success. So really, really important there. And I think equally important is collaboration with finance, right? Internal check-ins with your finance team. I meet with mine bi-weekly. We go over every single event, where we're sitting, making sure we're tracking the same expenses, right? That everything is lining up, and being transparent with them, also, right? And saying like, look, like our costs are coming in higher, our sponsorship, I'm getting a little nervous here. Like maybe ask, is there anything internally? Do you have an extra buffer you could move over, right? I think transparency goes a long way throughout that budgeting process. Again, everyone wants to be successful. So making sure that you're setting yourself up for success there. All right. ROI. So I think, again, ROI is certainly super important. User conferences have to deliver measurable business value and demonstrate success for the business because, again, they're a huge line item in the budget, and making sure that you are, driving ROI, driving pipeline, driving to your, hitting those KPIs is certainly key. So I think a couple things that kind of go along with ROI here, setting goals, right? Again, we talked about this at the beginning, but setting those clear, measurable KPIs from the onset, using historical data for reference, I think is key. And I think using data, again, allows you to constantly be adjusting your strategy, right? So as an example, we had an event we've sponsored for many years. It's a tier 1 show of ours. And we invested really, really heavily in the show floor and our activation on the show floor. But we also had ancillary events, dinners. We build out a space for a couple days and host people there. We did a big party, right? So we were spending money in a lot of different ways. And post the event last year, I said, let's look at every single activation that we did. Let's look at what we spent. Let's look at the ROI that we drove from the event. So we try for 10x ROI on source pipeline. That's a key metric for us, and we're relentlessly tracking and trying to hit that for all of our events. And if we're not hitting it, we're likely reevaluating. But in this case, we looked at every single campaign in the broader event and said, look, like we're spending 25-30% of our budget on the trade show floor, and we're driving really like 2x ROI on source pipe. When we look at these other activations, dinners that we're spending way less, we're driving 20x, right? So always looking and then adjusting your strategy to make sure you're able to hit your goals. So we decided this year for 2025, we were going to take some of that money from our show floor. We were going to decrease our sponsor level at the event, and we're going to invest more in the ancillary events that drove the most ROI for the business. So I think that's super important. That goes for a user conference as well, right? Look at historical data, adjust your strategy accordingly. Potentially, maybe you want to drive more prospects to your user conference instead of having it be 95% customers, because those prospects are net new deals, right? Those are driving more higher ACV than your renewals, your upsells, or your cross sells, right? So again, use those goals, use that historical data to make informed decisions for future. Revenue planning, again, make sure you have clear revenue goals, make sure you're balancing ticket sales, sponsorships, because again, you're measuring your ROI based on your spend, right? So at the end of the day, you have to be financially responsible and make sure that the amount of money you're spending on the event makes sense for the business impact that you're trying to drive, right? That pipeline that you're trying to drive, that should align with your budget. Sponsorship optimization. I think, again, sponsorships are an amazing way to offset expenses. And so looking at that and optimizing, again, to make sure that your budget at the end of the day is where you need it to be. Here we decided a couple years ago to implement an annual prospectus. So we launched in this year, I think, 2024, we launched in mid-December for our 2025 program. And we are incentivizing multi-event sign-ons and giving discounts to sponsors who sign on for multiple events. So that helps us project our sponsor revenue far out into the year, which is super helpful from a budget perspective. And again, offsets a huge portion of our costs, which is amazing. Cross-functional collaboration. I think this is really important. We talked a little bit about this, but user conferences take a village, right? Events teams are not going to put on a user conference by themselves. You need product, you need sales, you need customer success, right? You need cross-functional collaboration. And I think, again, using that data, using your ROI, your KPIs, your metrics, put together a post-event retrospective, and really use that data to push internally how events can move forward and drive business outcomes, right? Like as an example, for the last 2 years of our user conference, we've had 100% of accounts that come to the user conference renew, right? That's amazing. So we shout that statistic internally all the time, right? We say to our CS teams, like, you got to get your customers there because they will renew, right? There's a very, very high percentage that if you get them to the user conference, they're going to renew, right? So how do you use that data, again, to kind of further that cross-functional collaboration and help you drive the outcomes that you're looking to drive through the event? And then post-event analysis. We talked a little bit about this earlier too, but evaluate your performance against your KPIs and really tweak your strategies moving forward so that you are able to be successful, right? And use that data and again, make recommendations, and they're based on data, right? So they're strategic recommendations. You're not just saying like, I don't think we should do this anymore because it didn't work. You're using actual data to make that point. And I think that goes a long way with executives as well. All right, we're getting close here. So again, to justify the investment in a user conference, you have to track ROI, right? We talked a little bit about here at 6 Sense. We try to achieve a 10x ROI on source pipeline. That is, I think, industry standard is closer to 3%. And if you're not able to track pipeline, what other metrics are you tracking to help you prove the value of the event? So we track on-site meetings. We talked a little bit about that, but every account that comes to our conference, we mandate that they have a meeting on site. And it takes a huge amount of effort pre-event to coordinate those meetings. It takes a lot of time on site to execute those meetings. It takes a lot of people on site, right? We need subject matter experts, we need sales, we need customer success. But we find that that goes a long way in having those conversations and building those relationships and helping drive renewals and again, cross-sell and upsell. So I think again, user conferences have such a unique opportunity to contribute to increased loyalty, relationship building, and really are super powerful. And so I think the more we can talk about that internally, the more, again, and the easier it will be to get executive buy-in moving forward and to keep executing these programs. So just a couple of closing thoughts here. Again, user conferences can foster engagement, increase loyalty, drive business impact. Talk about that, right? Talk about that internally. Make sure that you are kind of shouting from the rooftops, right? You want money to be able to do your event again the next year, right? And so how are you proving the value beyond, again, the kind of standard lead generation metrics? Strategic planning and execution. So again, meticulous planning, cross-functional collaboration, budget management, stakeholder alignment, all really, really important to be able to execute an amazing conference. Community, right? Events are an amazing way to build community and to build advocacy. We spend a lot of time on site having customer testimonial videos, right? Like getting customers to talk to us on site, doing a customer advisory board, right? Get those people, get that buy-in, and you'll even be able to create content that lives well beyond the event, right? We use our customer testimonials and a lot of other marketing efforts that we do. So make sure you're taking advantage of those customers, make them be advocates for you and your company, and it will go a long way. And again, that experience-driven approach, right? Events, especially like the B2B space, it's super competitive, right? There's so many events out there. You have to make sure your content is compelling, you're creating those experiences, and you're making people want to come back year after year. I think that's really important, right? You want them to leave feeling, again, attached to the brand, having learned a ton, having built relationships both internally and with other folks at the event. Really, really important. And then ROI. I mean, again, number one, I think for us all as event marketers. How do we create high ROI events? How do we focus on innovating, delivering those amazing experiences, and having them be high return for the company? So that was a lot. I feel like I made it in time, maybe. But yeah, super excited. I hope I can answer a couple questions from the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Bethany. That was awesome. We so appreciate you. I have some questions too that I think most people watching will have too is, okay, your manager comes to you. You've never planned a user conference before. How much time do you need to execute it?
It's hard. I think, again, it depends on size, I would say, but
They say
I think
500 people.
500 people.
And we'll say it's a 2-day conference.
I would say 9 months, minimal 9 months, right? Again, it takes so much time to build the foundation before you even can launch like externally the event to the public, right? And that again is like the budget, the venue, the stakeholder buy-in, all those things. That isn't quick, right? That takes some time. So I think you need a couple months to get everything kind of internally aligned before you can even kind of go out into the market with your event, especially when it's a first-time event.
Okay, perfect. Y'all, so use that. Take it to your manager. If they're like, we need a conference in 3 months.
Yeah,
no. Don't call it a user conference. Maybe it's just a meetup with some pizza, but you're not going to get the ROI for a true user conference or even an industry conference unless you have a good amount of time. All right. Yes. Now, one that I know a lot of people ask us is, when does the full agenda need to be launched? You can pre-launch part of it, but when does your full agenda need to be done?
So we have, the last couple years, we have pushed and we have launched we've launched registration for our event like 2 months after the event has happened. So our event was in October. We launched registration in December for 2025, which is crazy because we have no agenda. So that's not to say like our agenda is set, right? We have no agenda. But we offer like pretty good discounting for early bird. I would say like 3 months before is great, right? Like at least 75% or so 3 months out. Because people, again, if they're new customers, if they don't know you, they don't know the company, they don't know the event, they're going to have to justify why they're coming, right? And that's likely going to be because of the content, right? Not because of the amazing party you're throwing or whatever else you're doing, the great location you want to go to. It's going to be the content. So I think 3 months is fair. And again, it doesn't have to be like all buttoned up and perfect, but as close as you can get. It's great.
Y'all use that for your manager too. All right, with Sarah Camp has a really good question. So she says, for 2x source pipeline, how are you doing attribution? Is it first touch, last touch? How are you doing?
So that's an interesting question. So we are doing first touch. That's how we're tracking our source pipe. We also track influence, right? And so we spend a lot of time tracking. And I think for a user conference, like the influence pipeline is probably a better metric to be looking at than source pipeline, because again, when you have 95% customers, like 10x ROI is really hard. You're not getting a ton of, your ACV on a new deal is way, way higher than it's going to be on an upsell. So I think, again, thinking strategically about what is the type of event, right? Like you want your goals, sure, to be stretched, but you want to set yourself up for success at the end of the day, right? You don't want to be set up to fail. And so I think, again, looking at that source pipeline for a user conference is definitely tougher than most of our other events. Like we go to a third-party trade show, we're probably hitting 20x ROI pretty easily. Again, because we're talking to a lot of net new people, right? And so I think you really do have to think about, again, like meeting. We have a huge meeting goal for our user conference, and that is a key metric for us there, because again, we're talking to those accounts, we're having those in-depth conversations, and that goes a long way into driving our pipeline. But again, it's probably not going to get us to 10x unsourced.
Got it. All right. So Bethany, thank you so much